Speculation still swirls about the disappearance of groundbreaking solo aviator Amy Johnson. Born in 1903 in Yorkshire, as Amy grew up, aviation was dominated by the rich and famous. During the 1920s and 30s, most female pilots were titled women, ladies and duchesses. Having graduated from Sheffield University, Amy was working as a typist for a firm of lawyers when, one Sunday afternoon and at a loose end, she caught a bus to Stag Lane Aerodrome in North London. She quickly became fascinated by the primitive biplanes she watched there, taking off and landing, and soon began to spend all her spare time at the aerodrome. With savings from her job, Amy gained a ground engineer's C licence, being the first woman to do so. In September 1928, Amy then started taking flying lessons at the London Aeroplane Club, and a year later earned her pilot's licence. She was soon to quit her secretarial job and work full-time as a mechanic at the aerodrome. Amy formulated the goal of being the first female pilot to fly solo from England to Australia and to break the time record of Bert Hinkler. In his Avro Avian aircraft, Hinkler had made history as the first person to do so in 1928, travelling the 18,000 kilometres in just over 15 days. With financial assistance from her parents, Amy purchased a second-hand gypsy moth GAAH, which she named Jason, after her fish merchant father's business trademark. Prior to her England to Australia flight, Amy's longest solo flight had been from London to Hull. Although her long-haul stint was meticulously planned, Amy's gender took centre stage as the main point of interest for the press. The Daily Mail newspaper carried a headline with the mistaken announcement that she had set off on the flight with a, quote, cupboard full of frocks. Amy departed Croydon Airport on May 5, 1930. Without the support technology of later pilots, Amy had no radio link with the ground, and neither did she have reliable real-time information about the weather. The maps she used were basic, and over some stretches of the journey she would be flying across uncharted land. With an almost reckless daring, Amy had plotted the most direct flight path simply by tracing a ruler on the map. The route had her crossing over some of the world's most inhospitable terrain, and also required that she flew the open cockpit for at least 8 hours at a time. It was crucial that she stuck to her itinerary because fuel was waiting to be loaded for her at each stop. She was forced to land in a sandstorm in the Iraq desert, but despite the unforeseen delay, Amy reached India in a record 6 days. Media outlets around the world suddenly began to pay attention, variously calling her the British girl Lindbergh, the wonderful Miss Johnson, and the lone girl flyer. In India, she unexpectedly encountered an army garrison when she landed on a parade ground, and when she reached Burma, now Myanmar, she faced the huge challenge of flying through the monsoon. Outside Rangoon, a rough landing tore a hole in Jason's wing and mangled its propeller. A nearby technical institute restored the wing by unpicking shirts that had been sewn using aeroplane fabric salvaged during the First World War. Although the monsoon stymied her chance to beat Hinkler's record, Amy finally landed at Darwin Airport on Saturday, May 24th, after 19.5 days. She was greeted by tumultuous crowds and over the next 6 weeks given superstar treatment as she toured Australia. Everywhere huge throngs of people came out to see her. Women would ask their hairdressers for an Amy Johnson wave, and her affectionate description of Jason, always saying, "But the engine was wonderful," became a popular catchphrase. Amy's daring flight seemed to capture the imagination and acclaim of the public, and she now became known as the Queen of the Air. At least 10 songs were penned about her, the most famous being Amy, Wonderful Amy, performed by Jack Hilton. Masses of fan mail arrived, and such was her fame that one envelope addressed simply to Amy What Flies in England actually reached her. She was described as having no fear due to the incredible risks of her flight, and herself spoke of the freedom of flying solo, being able to make her own decisions and not do what someone else was telling her. Finding it difficult to return to normal life, in July 1931, Amy winged it to Tokyo with her mentor and mechanic, Jack Humphreys, acting as a co-pilot. The pair set record times en route to both Moscow and Japan. In 1932, Amy set another solo record from London to Cape Town. In 1933, Amy and her new Scottish aviator husband, Jim Mollison, crossed the Atlantic. This was a flight made more dangerous by the necessity of carrying large amounts of fuel while being, for most of the journey, out of reach of land. Although the couple crashed in Connecticut, they happily established another world record and received a warm welcome in America. They were feted with a ticker tape parade down Wall Street in New York and were entertained by President Roosevelt. In 1934, the pair, who together were known as the Flying Sweethearts, took part in the London to Melbourne air race. Flying the revolutionary new de Havilland DH-88 Comet, although they clocked up a record time to India, they found themselves forced to retire because of engine trouble. Amy's last major solo flight was in May 1936, when she reclaimed her England to South Africa record. She and Mollison led a glamorous life of celebrity status, but their troubled marriage ended in divorce in 1938. A year later, Amy was to turn her skills to the war effort with the outbreak of World War II. In 1940, she joined the newly formed Air Transport Auxiliary. This was an organisation set up to convey planes around the country for use by the Royal Air Force. On Sunday, January 5, 1941, Amy left Blackpool flying an airspeed Oxford, which she had been ordered to ferry to RAF Kidlington, near Oxford. It was later concluded that due to adverse weather conditions, her plane went off course. Soon reportedly out of fuel, Amy had to bail out as her aircraft crashed into the Thames estuary near Herne Bay. At about 3:30 p.m, a seaman in a convoy of approaching ships claimed to have spotted an aeroplane and then soon a parachute floating down through falling snow. Several sailors later reported then seeing two bodies in the water, of whom one was described as fresh-faced and wearing a helmet. This person called out for help in a high-pitched voice as they were seen to drift dangerously close to the ship's propellers. When it became clear that it was impossible to save the helmeted pilot, the captain of one of the ships dived into the icy water to try and save whom he assumed to be a passenger. He was observed reaching the spot and then resting beside a floating object before attempting to swim back to the ship. He himself was rescued from the water, but due to the extreme cold, later died from exposure and shock. Neither Amy nor the so-called second body were ever recovered. Parts of the plane she was flying and some of her possessions, her watertight flying bag, logbook and checkbook, later washed up on a nearby shore. Speculation about what really happened that day and why Amy was so far off course has varied from rumours of her being on a secret mission to the more simple explanation that she became disorientated and simply ran out of fuel. The secret mission theory was probably sparked by a statement from the Admiralty, which did mention two bodies. Although it was later retracted, some newspapers ran with the idea of a mysterious Mr. X. In 1999, a former member of a nearby heavy anti-aircraft regiment voiced a fear that Amy may have been targeted by friendly fire. Tom Mitchell from Crowborough, Sussex, claimed that he shot down Amy's aircraft when she twice gave the wrong identification code during the flight. Mitchell explained how he sighted the aircraft, contacted it by radio, and twice made a request for the signal. When the wrong one was given twice, 16 rounds of shells were then fired and the plane nosedived into the Thames estuary. He said that his regiment thought it was an enemy plane until the next day when they read the papers and realised it was Amy. Their officers told them never to tell anyone what had happened. Holland's theory has in the meantime been disputed due to the distance of his unit from the plane. In 2016, a historian called Alex Gill stated that the son of a crew member of a nearby ship claimed that Amy had perished because she was drawn into the blades of the ship's propellers. Although the crewman had not observed this to occur, he believed it to be true. As a member of the Wartime Air Transport Auxiliary, with no known gravesite as her body was never recovered, Amy is now commemorated on the dedicated Air Forces Memorial at Runnymede in Surrey. Her Jason gypsy moth is on display at the London Science Museum in South Kensington. The mystery surrounding Amy's final hours is in contrast to the bravery and driving energy of her inspirational life.